All right. By the pocket watch, I'd say it's about time to start. I see Herb just checked his wristwatch, so I'm sure that we're similar in time there. Yes, all right. And the seats are looking full, which is fantastic. I know this is probably our highest RSVP'd event for this year. But when you talk about a cornerstone business in Indiana County and throw in some food, I think that that's the perfect combination. So tonight we're going to hear from Louis Donato Tate, and he's going to talk about his new book, The Luigi Way, and it's going to be some Q&A after that, and we're just going to learn about what it takes to, hard work it takes to build a business in Indiana County and to be successful even during hardship. A lot of it, I think, is a testament that the business has been around so long, and that, for those of you who've been in the area for a while, you look up on Philadelphia Street around the county, and not every business survives. So I think it really speaks to the hard work, the determination, and the character of the people who are running the business for it to be thriving and alive for so long. So we'll cut the introduction short. Louis, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, for that wonderful introduction. I mean, wasn't that wonderful? So nice of him to say, but thank you all for making time in all of your busy schedules to come out tonight to hear this presentation. It certainly means a lot. So my name is Louis Donato Tate, for those of you that I haven't yet met quite yet. Myself and my brother Sal are the next generation of Luigi's Ristorante and Catering in Clymer, Pennsylvania. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about my recently published book, The Luigi Way. So what is the Luigi Way? Energy, innovation, and money get a business started, but values keep the business alive and healthy in the long run. The Luigi Way, Benedictine values proven effective in leadership, is a case study with an application in the necessary traits to keep a business running, highlighting how our family's business has survived many challenges, particularly focusing on the COVID-19 pandemic. This book also explores the intersection between Benedictine values and critical leadership skills, how the two are interrelated, and how our family's business has achieved long-term success, particularly in a highly volatile industry. Now, culture comes from values and keeps a company united and alive in their purpose. Every company has a culture, but that culture is not formed by chance. It must be formed by design. Our team has embraced Benedictine values over the last 41 plus years, and these values go beyond their religious connotation and have been proven effective for us in the long run. So my question to all of you is, if you haven't yet already, what would happen if you embraced a strong set of values in your life? So today's presentation will be primarily focused on our family business's history, but I wanted to start off by sharing our values with you, and my hope is that you can see these values weaved into our family's business history story. So it's love your neighbor as yourself, prayer, a life guided by mindfulness, faithfulness, and deep reflection, stability, daily conversion, obedience, discipline, humility, stewardship, and community. The restaurant industry statistically has one of the highest failure rates of all industries nationwide. In an article published by CNBC in 2016, over 60% of restaurants fail within their first year, and over 80% of restaurants fail within their first 5 years. And then with the odds already stacked against the industry, here comes the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result of the pandemic, over 110,000 restaurants, which equates to roughly 17% of restaurants nationwide, have permanently closed. And the average lifespan of these restaurants was 16 years. So, I mean, these weren't startup businesses. These were well-established businesses. So you might be thinking, with all these odds stacked against us, how did a restaurant in an old coal town with one red light make it as long as we have? Well, let me share that with you. So this is one of my favorite quotes. Some of you might be familiar with this musician. I thought that this quote brings a lot of value and meaning. So it says, "All people have is hope. That's what brings the next day, and whatever that day may bring. A hope grounded in the real world of living, friendship, work, and family." Bruce Springsteen. So the year was 1984, and my father, Louis, was my age. He was a blink away from turning 30 years old, and certain life circumstances were troubling him, leaving him unsure of what his future would hold and what he was destined to be. My father always had hopes and aspirations of being an entrepreneur, but wasn't certain what kind of entrepreneur. And then, with no warning, an unanticipated opportunity presented itself to him, launching the beginning of what's known today as Luigi's Ristorante. So what created this entrepreneurial vision? To start, so this is a picture of the old Tate's Market in Arcadia, Pennsylvania. Pictured here is, to the left, Anthony P. Tate, which is my great-grandfather, Mary Tate, Anthony's sister, and Joe Tate, his cousin. So like I said, my father always envisioned himself as an entrepreneur, but wasn't certain what kind. It was always one of his dreams. He was the son, grandson, and great-grandson of entrepreneurs. So there was no escaping this calling to entrepreneurship. Starting with his great-grandfather, Salvatore Tate, who was an Italian immigrant who immigrated over here from Italy in the late 1800s. Him and his family ended up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania, in the late 1800s before moving to a small coal town, Arcadia, with intentions of working in the coal mines. Shortly after moving to the area, Salvatore had noticed a demand for a store that sold coal mining supplies and other general grocery items, as well as other convenience items as well. So then in 1905, he opened up the store, naming it Tate Brothers. And then shortly before the Great Depression had hit, he had passed away from unknowingly rupturing his appendix, leaving behind his wife Anina and 8 of their children. So then during the Great Depression, my family's grocery store was temporarily closed, like many other businesses in the area, let alone the nation at that point. So during that time, Anina had moved to our current hometown of Clymer, Pennsylvania, and had reopened the store with 3 of her sons. They were Anthony, William Salvatore, which is my grandfather, and also known as Skip, as many of you might know him, and George. And at the age of 10, my father began working in the grocery store. He was tasked with stocking shelves and unloading trucks, labor-intensive tasks that instilled a work ethic at a young age. And my grandpa and his brothers, they were your typical mid-1900s businessmen, descendants of immigrants with a mentality of work, work, work. And when you're done working, you work some more. So, needless to say, that was the biggest focus of all of them. So growing up and working in a family business, it came with many sacrifices and lessons. Most of the time, the only time my father really got off was for major life events. He had to sacrifice his weekends and social life to support the family business, with aspirations of being one of the owners of the supermarket one day. Being the oldest of 7 children, his mindset was on becoming part owner of that store like his father had been. So then after working 20 years in the grocery store, he came to the realization that things were a little bit different now. And, it wasn't the same as when his father and his 2 uncles were single men without families. All of them now had families to provide for. And the plan was the oldest child of each of the three families was to take an ownership of the supermarket. So, at that point, there's a lot of heads involved, and, it can get complicated at that point. So at the age of 30, he knew it was time to make a move. But the question in his mind was, what is this move going to be, and when will the right opportunity arise? Thus, creating the founding of Luigi's Ristorante. Again, I share another powerful quote. That's by Donovan Bailey, and he says, "Follow your passion, be prepared to work hard and sacrifice, and above all, don't let anyone limit your dreams." So in this picture here, this is obviously my father and my Uncle Eddie with their grandfather, Anthony Pete Tate. So the year was 1984, and my Uncle Ed, my father's brother and business partner, can remember the night that my father and my grandfather were having that life-changing conversation. My father was puzzled, and having realized that he had spent decades of years in sacrifice and commitment to the family business, that it wasn't going to be his destiny. So the emotions of curiosity and excitement and speculation and fear all weighed on his heart. Having not gone to college, the thought of not having many other options seemed real at that time. Most people would have given way to those emotions, but not my father. Having faith in God at the forefront of his focus and a strong work ethic instilled in him at a young age, he knew that if he kept his faith strong and continued to work hard and didn't doubt himself, that he could achieve whatever he put his mind to. And as my father and grandfather continued brainstorming, my grandfather mentioned how an old miner's bar named Angie's, formerly known as Benedictine's, which some of you might be familiar with, was up for sale. So he continued to say to my father, "Why don't you buy it and start your own business? And I'll help you get it started for the first year, and then after that, you're on your own." But as many of you know, I think Skip was sucked in just as much as the rest of us, and he was very gracious in his time. So shortly after all of that, my Uncle Ed had returned home from working in the mines, and my father and grandfather were having that conversation, and my Uncle Ed was washing his lunchbox and was hearing the conversation, and he began to realize that he didn't want to work in the coal mines the rest of his life. He was in the mines at the time, and being one of the youngest of 7, he knew that the family business wasn't really in his destiny. He had to figure out a different path. So he approached my father and said, "Hey, if there's room for me, I'd really like to be a part of that one day." And sure enough, not long after that conversation, that idea became a reality. My uncle and my father went down to Marion Center Bank, took out a loan for $52,000, nothing to back it. As Bon Jovi said, literally living on a prayer, and by the grace of God, and credit to many of you here this evening, we're here now 41 years later. After purchasing the building, they both unanimously agreed to make their new business a restaurant bar similarly to the previous owner. But the main difference being is they wanted to introduce an Italian menu to the area and convert it from a tavern-style bar to a family-style restaurant. They knew this was going to take a lot of work, and the tavern was very, very small, but fortunately it was still pretty decently furnished. It was enough to get them started. They had a few mix and match tables and chairs and plates and cups and silverware and tablecloths. There was a horseshoe-shaped bar and a little L-shaped dining room with only a handful of tables. The kitchen was approximately a little over 200 square feet empty. So after they added some basic kitchen appliances and, a refrigerator, freezer, counter space, utensils, there really wasn't much room to walk. The staff would quite literally have to walk sideways between one another to get in and out of that kitchen. at the time. So it was a lot more complicated back then. But starting a small family business from scratch, it's not easy, and they didn't want to overextend themselves by taking on more than they already had, especially not knowing if this business would be a success or not. So incrementally, over time, completing one renovation project after another, until all of the required improvements they wanted to make, both big and small, were done, they were eventually completed. So when I asked my Aunt Teresa about what she remembered, my father and my uncle, when they first bought the building and started their business, she shared with me that, well, I was home and was present physically for many of the discussions that took place with my father and grandfather, sitting at the dining room table, discussing whether to purchase Benedictine's building and start a restaurant. Grandfather Tate had owned a bowling alley and restaurant and dance hall in Medina, New York. So he had firsthand knowledge of the sacrifices that it had taken to be in this kind of business. And she can remember him saying that the restaurant business is the hardest business there is. So my grandfather had his concerns and initially wasn't fully or my great-grandfather, I apologize, was initially, concerned and had his speculations at first, but, she continued to say that the thing for her father, my grandfather, what really was the driving force in this decision was knowing that all of the recipes that his mother, Mary E. Perry Tate, they were ethnic and wonderfully delicious. And he was excited to share the famous sauce and meatballs that were soon to become a favorite in Western Pennsylvania. People from all over the county come to enjoy the famous sauce and pasta entrees. And now they were able to enjoy a traditional Italian pasta dinner like they had done at their home for many years. So this is a picture of the current restaurant now, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So our location here in Clymer is now currently owned and operated by myself, my father, and my brother Salvatore. So again, they quickly realized how difficult it was starting a business from scratch. And the first biggest challenge they had faced was having absolutely no restaurant experience or knowledge of the industry. So, for several years, a lot of their growth was driven by trial and error, making decisions that became learning lessons, failures that became improvements. Spending many years working in the grocery store provided not just a strong work ethic, but it provided a strong business sense as well as financial literacy, all things which are very important in starting a business. It's a mindset required to own and operate any kind of business. But arguably more importantly, having the moral and physical support of their parents and their siblings was crucial to their success, not just early on, but even still to this day. Now, in the beginning stages, my grandfather and my grandmother did a lot of the cooking. They had two other women that were self-taught that helped them in the kitchen. My aunts and my father and uncle helped tend bar and wait tables. This was truly a family affair. My uncle still kept his job in the coal mines at the time to help ensure that this new business of theirs would continue to be a success. And they began with a simple one-page menu. This was at the suggestion of their parents. They said to my father and uncle, "Start with a simple menu. Don't attempt to do too much too fast. Give yourself time to work out the kinks and then slowly begin to add more items to the menu and more staffing as it permits." This is my grandfather Skip, one of his famous sayings, "No man is lonely while eating spaghetti. It requires too much attention." Now, does anyone out here have any idea what that means? Like, why you're not lonely when you're eating it? Why does it require too much attention? Anyone have an idea?
Because you gotta twist it on a fork, and then you gotta pick the fork up, eat it, and it just keeps all your attention.
So exactly, you got it. That's it. because as you know, it can be kind of messy when you're eating spaghetti. You know, the sauce might be going around. If you're not paying attention, boom, you got sauce on your white shirt. You ruined your favorite shirt. It requires so much attention when you're eating it that you forget about the things that might be making you sad, or the things that are making you anxious, or any other concern in the world for that period of time. You're not lonely because you're so focused on making sure you eat that pasta in a clean way. So here he is, you know, preparing one of his dishes there. Though they had sacrificed a lot of work and time in the supermarket, it was minuscule compared to the financial, social, and physical sacrifices they had to make now, starting this business from scratch. This kind of sacrifice required giving up time with family and friends, working on holidays, working dawn to dusk, canceling plans at the last minute, which unfortunately sometimes we still do today. Not because we choose to, but that's just the life we have. And not taking much of a take-home pay at first. You know, they'd be in there 14 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with a late-night bar scene. All of this was done, you know, until they knew they were going to make it. They didn't necessarily want to be putting in this kind of time and hours. I mean, realistically, who does? But they knew they had to do it to be successful. With no investors or large capital reserve to comfort them, they knew they had to make every minute and every penny matter. Excuse me, I need a drink real quick here. So not only was this a sacrifice to them, but it was also a sacrifice to their parents, who wanted them to be successful just as much as they did. They knew that this was their calling, and they were driven to do whatever it was to be successful. Now, with demand slowly growing day to day, year to year, it allowed them the opportunity to employ some extra staff. They were able to hire a couple of cooks, bartenders, servers, dishwashers. The cosmetic upgrades they were able to give the old building gave it a new look, a look that gradually formed its new identity. Slowly but surely, they were creating the business they envisioned. And as things progressed, my father approached his father with the idea of closing on Sundays. And my grandfather, he didn't like that. He quickly responded and he goes, "Bullshit! You're staying open 7 days a week, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, late night bar scene until that mortgage is paid off. Until then maybe you could think about taking it a little bit easier." Thank you for laughing. I thought it was funny too. It was because after COVID, I approached my father and I said, "Hey, Rizzo's and Crabtree's close Monday, Tuesdays. Why don't we close on Tuesdays now too?" And they faced a little bit of backlash, but ultimately it ended up being the decision we needed to make. So it all worked out. But anyways, my grandfather, he could be a tough guy. He was a hardworking, faith-filled man who understood the importance of hard work, integrity, and community. And even though this was my father and my uncle's business, he was still the boss. You know, every decision they wanted to make, they had to run it by him out of respect. And it was respect for his opinion and his wisdom. Having been an entrepreneur his whole life, they understood the importance of his contribution to the business. And as challenging as things got at times, neither my uncle or my father had any moments of regret. They both admitted that they believed that they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into at the time, but they were so determined to make this business a success, and they wanted to show their parents that they could do it. So a few years into the business, as their sales and reputation were steadily increasing and expanding, they began to get a better feel for things and having more confidence in the future of their business. There was still one pressing factor that required their constant attention, and that was transforming the atmosphere of the old business, of a tavern bar, into the atmosphere they desired it to be, which again is, geared for family feel restaurant. Now, for many years, as you may know, that building was a place where patrons could have a few drinks and carry on, your typical bar scene. Now, their goal was to turn this atmosphere into something that was warm and welcoming, a culture that embraced family feelings and values, a place where families could bring their children and not have to worry about their children being exposed to anything that none of us would want our children to be exposed to. And to do this, they understood that it was going to take some time. These kind of changes aren't easy. They had to have constant awareness and attentiveness to any potential or present conflicts that might be going on and maintain law and order. They had a zero tolerance policy for abusing alcohol and profanity, resulting in the attraction and retention of the kind of clientele they had wished to serve, that being families. Now, to do this, they had to be consistent in a few things. And the first was respectfully defining what their values, morals, and non-negotiable behaviors are with their staff. They had to strategically build a culture based on those desired values, morals, and expected behaviors, putting into place different checks and balances to ensure accountability. Maintaining a constant focus that our culture and our brand are aligned with one another. And most importantly, living by their values. It's one thing to have these things posted on a wall and say, oh, this is what I believe. But, action, as all of you know, action always speaks louder in words than words. So, really truly living by these values is what was going to set the standard. It took my father and uncle roughly 5 years or so to change the building's former reputation of a tavern to this casual fine dining family restaurant. And sticking to this goal, they were able to achieve it, conquering one of many initial challenges they had faced, knowing there were still more to come. Thus, it led into an opportunity for expansion. So roughly a little under 5 years of opening the restaurant, my father saw an opportunity to open another business. Another old building located near the restaurant came up for sale. And at first, they were a little skeptical about taking on another mortgage payment naturally, especially only 4 years after opening the restaurant. But the more thought they put into it, the more enticing this idea became. So eventually, my father and my uncle decided to buy it. Now this building, it was a stately old building that had character. It used to be an old jewelry store, actually. It was well maintained and it had an ideal location, being roughly only 100 feet away from the main traffic light in town. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Yeah. That happened to me shortly before I started, so I was like, I could have been up here and that would have been going on. So the light bulb went off, and my father said to my brother, or his brother Ed, why don't we buy it and open a pizza shop? And my Uncle Ed was fully on board with that, and he definitely saw the benefits of that. And if they continued to work as hard as they've been at the restaurant, they could eventually build up the pizza shop to a point where they could bring in more staff and help them carry some of the load of running both of the businesses. So of course they understood that this would come with an even greater sacrifice than they were already experiencing with the restaurant. But naturally, being young and ambitious and feeling like they could take on the world, they decided to buy it and open up this pizzeria. Now, shortly after opening it, my grandfather adamantly lamented to my father, saying, "Why did you buy that building? You are already devoting all of your time to this restaurant. How do you plan to balance both?" And he was frustrated. And he initially thought that they made a mistake by buying this. But my father saw the bigger picture, and so did my uncle. And not only did this building have a prime location, but it was right beside a movie rental store. So for years they noticed people going in and out of this movie rental store. And they said, how convenient would it be to have a pizza shop right beside the movie store? You go and pick up a movie and a pizza all within a matter of a few steps. Inevitably, that's exactly what happened. And once my grandfather had realized that, he finally quit giving them both grief. But my father can remember a conversation that he had with his father during the first year or two of operating the pizza shop. And his father would ask him frequently, how's that place doing down there? And my father would say, okay. And that was it, And after a few attempts of trying to get a more in-depth answer out of my father, he finally asked my father, are you sure you're not taking any money out of the restaurant to pay the bills for the pizza shop? And my father looked at him and said, not yet. So not too long after that, it set us into our first major setback, the fire of 1996. I like to make the joke that basically when we had the fire, it was the day I was brought home from the hospital from being born. It was the day I was born or the day after I was born? The day I was born. Yeah, the day I came home. So I like to make the joke that I was born to bring fire into this world. Hopefully I wasn't a bad omen and this doesn't happen again. But time will tell. The Lord has a plan. So the year was 1996, 12 years after opening the restaurant. And my father and uncle experienced this first major setback. On the day I was brought home from the hospital, my father leaving the hospital full of joy. Now, this was a time before cell phones, or at least if there was something in the form of a cell phone, he didn't have it. So he was leaving the hospital full of joy, having his firstborn child, a son, Lou Jr. here, to coming home to seeing his restaurant engulfed in flames. I mean, talk about a whirlwind of emotion. There was an electrical fire that had started in the kitchen of the building, so the entire back end of the restaurant was engulfed in flames. He was in total disbelief. Black smoke flooded the sky with burning embers lighting it up. Fortunately, the firefighters were able to keep the fire under control and prevented total damage to the entire building. The front end of the restaurant did suffer some damage, though, from the smoke. So if you come in today, and some of you might have already noticed this, there are several pictures hanging in the lounge area of the restaurant with black stains on them from the smoke from the fire, giving a little extra character to the place. But this situation really presented a tough decision for them. Option one was to close the restaurant for an unforeseeable amount of time and temporarily release the team until all of the required renovation was done. Or option B was to close the restaurant permanently. And after putting much time and consideration into this, they had decided that they were going to do everything they needed to do to repair it and reopen the restaurant again. Having the pizza shop as a second form of income made the decision a little bit easier, but they still knew it could be very challenging trying to support two families at this point off of this very tiny business's income. But by the grace of God, the pizza shop was busy enough that it was able to support both families during this 6 months until they were able to reopen. Now, although the restaurant staff had been temporarily laid off, every single one of them had returned to work once we were able to reopen. Now, this was a testament to how well they were treated by my father and my uncle and my grandparents. And they could have easily remained working wherever they had gone, but they knew that what they had at Luigi's, it wasn't just employment, and they weren't just another number. They were part of a family. So, without knowing what had happened the day before, one of our rocks of the business, Patricia Pavlovsky, who's been with us now for over 30 years still, and she's still with us to this day, she had showed up to work early that next day, in the morning and was shocked to see the damage that this fire had caused. And I have a quote from her saying that, I couldn't wait to be back cooking. It was what I lived for, and I didn't consider it a job. I loved cooking. And she was the very first person that committed to coming back as soon as we were able to reopen. Another team member of ours, Vicki Venard, who has been with us as well for over 30 years, had shared with me that when she first heard news of the restaurant catching on fire over the radio, she was nervous about being out of work, but she knows that, sometimes good things can come to us through tragedies. This gave her the ability to give more time and attention to her mother-in-law that was dealing with some terminal health issues at the time. And a few days after the fire, when Vicki had received a call from my father, he assured her that her job would still be there if she wanted it, if she was willing to come back. And after a long 6 months of restorations and renovations, everything was complete. We had reopened. And at this time, Vicki was working at another restaurant. But once we had reopened, Vicki had decided to leave that temporary job and return to working at Luigi's. She had shared with me that Luigi's is family, and I miss that family. Shortly after the fire, my father and uncle began to realize that now, both having their own families to support, they should, maybe expand and continue to build upon this growing success that they're finding. But the question was how and when. At the time, there weren't any practical opportunities present until divine intervention opened the door to the next chapter of the Luigi story. So the opportunity for expansion, part 2. So how Du Bois came to be. Dr. Jeffrey Rice was a young dentist and investor from Du Bois, Pennsylvania. And this man had a vision to turn a dilapidated downtown Du Bois into a prosperous attraction with open storefronts all along the main street. Now, Dr. Rice was a huge fan of Luigi's, and not only did he love the food, but arguably more important, he appreciated the work ethic that was on display, and he appreciated the way they owned and operated their business. So one day, Dr. Rice approached my father and my uncle and asked them if they would ever consider opening another restaurant in Du Bois. Dr. Rice knew their business had brand recognition, fueling his confidence in introducing a good, homemade Italian cuisine to downtown Du Bois. My father and my uncle were intrigued, naturally, and as attractive as it seemed, they both had a tough decision to make. Not only would they have to start a second restaurant from scratch in a city located roughly 50 miles away from Clymer, but it would result in them no longer being able to share the workload of the current restaurant in Clymer and the pizza shop. They knew that one of them would have to move to Du Bois, but the question was, who? Considering my father was recently married and I was recently born and they were building a house, it only seemed fitting that my Uncle Ed would be the one to take the reins and spearhead this new project in Du Bois. Now, this decision did result in some backlash and resistance from their parents, and they didn't want them to open a third business at this point, arguing that it would be too much to handle. Even back then, my father and my uncle, their parents, my grandparents, they knew the high risk of opening another restaurant. And my grandfather told my father and my uncle not to do it. He said to them both, "You're already working 6 to 7 days a week. How the hell can you handle more?" Even though both my father and my uncle had a different opinion than their father, he was still the boss, so they had to turn down Dr. Rice's offer. Now, 6 months after all of that had taken place, my grandfather had passed away. So during those 6 months, 2 other restaurants had gone in and unfortunately didn't make it. They had struggled with a few different things. But that then led Dr. Rice to approaching my father and uncle again and asking them if they would reconsider their decision. So my father looked to my uncle and said, "It must be a sign to have the same opportunity present itself twice." So this time they told Dr. Rice yes, and they believed it was divine intervention. So after accepting Dr. Rice's offer, the business arrangements began. And considering my father and uncle did not have enough working capital to make this kind of massive investment solely on their own, Dr. Rice had agreed to a lease-to-own business agreement with them. So once everything was paid for, they would fully own the building and all the contents within it. Having helped start the original location in Clymer, my Uncle Eddie had a very detailed list of all the things he would need and would go to different auctions to find the best deals on equipment that he could. And at this time, they started hiring a core group of staff that they would transport from Du Bois to Clymer, and they would work alongside our team in Clymer, and they would learn our system. You know, this business decision was crucial to building the second location in Du Bois. Having a standardized business model that was easy to replicate would help further ensure that this second restaurant would be successful. So in 1999, they were prepared to open their doors for the very first time in Du Bois. And this location has also been blessed with a growing success and remains open to this day. So preparation of the next generation. It's my brother Sal and I working on a busy Sunday afternoon. I was 14 years old at the time, and my brother was 10. My father started having my brother and I work at the age of 10 years old. And at that age, we'd usually only work just one day a week after Mass. We'd come in and help wash dishes and roll silverware and fold tablecloths, little things to instill a work ethic at a young age. Now that we're older, we definitely see the value in how he had prepared us for what it came to be. And, had he not, who knows how things would be today. But I am, and I know my brother, we are most grateful for having been introduced to the business at a young age and being brought up in every step of it, from cleaning bathrooms to now making critical business decisions. Learning each and every aspect of the business was critical to our development as now leaders within this business. So a funny story for you guys. So when I was early adolescent age, maybe pre-adolescent, I'd be back in the dish room washing dishes. I'd have my sprayer there, and I was in the zone, trying to impress the older guys. And my father would come back to me and he'd say, "I need you to go out and talk to the customers." And at that time, I hated it. I was shy, and I'd say to him, "They don't want some little kid in dirty clothes coming up to them and bothering them while they're eating. I'm just as quick-witted as my father, fortunately." And he said, "No, son, it's actually quite the opposite. They want to see the owner's young children working, getting dirty, and coming out and talking to them." And at that young of an age, you just can't comprehend something like that. It just didn't make sense to me. So I said, "All right," and went and ran off to the employee bathroom that was a one-person bathroom. So I'd lock the door, and I had no cell phone at this time, way before I had a cell phone, and I don't know what I did to distract my 100-mile-per-hour brain at the time, but I would listen intently till I didn't hear his voice anymore, and I'd sneak back off to the dish room, and shortly after, he'd come to the dish room and say, "Did you talk to the customers?" And I said, "Yes, I did, Dad." And he said, "No, you didn't. Let's go." And he'd take me out by the arm and take me around to each of these tables. And, now that I'm older, I realize how valuable that was, because I could be like many other people my age and younger, the tech generation. Everyone's getting tech neck. And but it gave me the ability to have not just a conversation with someone, but have a genuine connection with people, whether it's people I've known my whole life or complete strangers, and the ability to be open and strike up a conversation and find something that we might have in common, and just, genuinely show and express that I care about you as a human being, and I value your life. That's one of the many things we live by in this business. So, with all that said, though the business had faced many challenges throughout the years, nothing could have prepared us for March 19th of 2020, which brought about the biggest unforeseen challenge the business had faced so far, that being the COVID-19 pandemic. So pictured here is a picture I had taken during the takeout-only services. And at this point in time, no one really knew the true extent to how severe this virus was, or how long these lockdowns were going to be, or anything else. There was so much uncertainty and fear, and we didn't know what to think. We're like, how long are we going to be takeout only? How long can we sustain this? And one evening, after quite a heck of a rainstorm, I had taken this picture of this beautiful rainbow. I mean, it was the most powerful, vivid rainbow I'd ever seen in my life, and you could kind of tell that here in the picture. So we had taken that as a sign from God that our business was not going to fail, that He was going to take care of us, and as long as we continued to work hard and do the right things, that He would not let this business fail. So as I had mentioned earlier, and again, I feel it's important to reshare this information with you. The restrictions that were placed upon this industry during this pandemic had resulted in 17% of restaurants, which is over 110,000 restaurants nationwide, permanently closing, with an average lifespan of 16 years. And one of the many reasons why is converting a full-service restaurant into takeout-only services is a very difficult thing to do. In the book, I go into great detail on, some of the impact it had on the nation, and how the impact it had on the industry, a bunch of statistics as well, more detail on how it affected us and what we did to get through it. But for the sake of time, because I know I got to get you fed soon and rub your shoulders and ask how everything's tasting, I'm just going to share a few key points during this period of time. So during the first 3 to 4 months, we were only permitted for takeout-only services. And due to the lack of available work, we had to temporarily release 80% of our staff. We were able to keep all of our full-time staff on payroll, but unfortunately, all of our part-time staff had to be temporarily released. Prior to the pandemic, we were open 6 days a week, and then during the pandemic, we were only open 4 days a week. We went from being open 10 hours a day to only 4 to 5 hours a day, and the bills did not change. We had no choice to drastically and rapidly restructure our entire business model to adapt to these restrictions. And like I'd mentioned, going from a full-service restaurant to takeout only was not easy. So we gathered together our team members and began brainstorming on, what we need to do, how can we get through this, what information do we have, what information do we need, and really put together a good plan as a team, because we couldn't do this without each other. And having been immensely blessed with the team that we have and the community support, we were able to make it through that. Another thing we had done was obviously collect the voice of the customer and figure out how we could best and safely serve everybody here. So after this period of time, as restrictions began to ease, we were slowly permitted to return to 25% dining services for a period of time, and then 50 and 75, and eventually 100% dining services again. And again, because of all of your support here, we were able to escape the fowler's snare. We did not become another statistic. We survived one of the biggest challenges our industry has faced as a whole. And still, because of you, we are surviving and thriving to this day. Now, here we are today. Now, this month of May, we are celebrating 41 years. This is a picture we had taken last year for 40 years. So pictured here is myself, my sister Angelica, my father, my mother Debbie, and my brother Sal. I have a quote from Scripture there, Proverbs 3, 5-6, which is, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and He will make your path straight. And lean not on your own understanding, but in all ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight. Something that we live by, and if there's anything of value I could offer all of you this evening, it is this verse from Scripture and sharing my faith with each and every one of you. No matter what we face in life, the sun always comes back out. It was raining on the way here, but the sun's going to come back out. Storms come and go in our lives, but if we have ourselves grounded in a set of strong values, whatever that may be, whether you have faith in the Lord or not, if you ground yourself in something that's bigger than yourself, you can weather whatever storm might come your way. And so with that, I thank you for your time and open up the floor to questions. Jonathan has a microphone. What was that? Oh, yeah.
That's like working a whole year in 2 days. I am honored and flattered and humbled for all your friendship and support. As he stated, directly or indirectly, it's because of all of you that we've been able to do what we do. We've done before.
We have our first question here.
Question?
No question. There we go.
All right.
They can be for my father, too.
This is kind of a generic question.
Sure.
With so many wonderful, wonderful Italian-style dishes, how do you make decisions on what specific items appear on your menu?
That's a great question. So, I might repeat myself a little bit here, but in the early stages, it's really important to start with what you do well and start small. Things that you've had people try and they say, oh, I really like this. You should have that as a special or put that on the menu. I mean, there has to be some public desire for that, and you don't know if there's a desire for that dish unless you offer it to people. So, oftentimes we might have one of our chefs whip up something that they might want to try, and the team will try it, and we might offer a little bit to different customers that come in and see if they like it. And and if enough people say, oh, that's really good, make that a special, then that's what we'll do. So if any of you ever have any suggestions, we're always open. We value the voice of the customer, so we're in this business to serve you. So thank you for. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Sir?
Oh, all right.
When did you begin selling products in stores, and what kind of challenges did you have?
Father?
I will say,
Here.
during the housing meltdown, if you all remember that, when it was quadruple selling mortgages, and then everything kind of got scary. I never wanted to do it, but I said, meaning sell our sauce in the stores. And fortunately, we do sell a very large amount of sauce. But I was worried that if we started selling sauce, they would no longer come to the restaurant. So I always hesitated. And when the housing meltdown hit, I was getting nervous, because that's even when we started taking reservations for 2 or more. Before, you had to have 6 to get a reservation. And if 5 showed up and said, the 6th one's lost, he's on his way. We got onto it pretty quick and said, I'm sorry, we can't seat you until he shows up. So, and then it did go a lot smoother when you just were able to take who came through the door first. Okay, they get the next table. The next couple gets the next table. Now that we're all reservations, we're grateful for it, but it's a pain in the ass. Especially on Mother's Day and IUP graduation. So, but we've kind of handled it pretty well now over the years. But,
Challenges of getting the sauce.
oh, the sauce. See, I can drift off really easy. I have the ADD thing going on all my life. But that prompted me to say, okay, we better start trying to sell this sauce to bring in a little extra income. And my dearest friend, one of my dearest friends, Ed Bratton, you all remember Ed. I was very good friends with Ed, and he owned the Giant Eagle at the time, and I still remember the big display that he put up, and I took Louis in with him, and we got a picture in front of it, and then that kind of got it rolling. And now we do deliver it to a lot of the stores in the area, and it's made in Punxsutawney at Stella Foods. But it's not what we use at the restaurant, because the recipe's like a little bit different. You know, that way it can't be copied completely. So, and we have the hot pepper sauce now too. It doesn't sell as brisk as the regular sauce, but I've been thinking of adding a marinara sauce too. But we're doing okay with it, and we'll just take our time and wait till we venture into other things possibly. But challenges. Well, there's really no challenges. Just getting it picked up and getting it brought to Clymer where we store it, and then trying to decide who's taking it. And are they going to wreck the van? Are they going to get lost? Or drop the case and smash it? You know. So it's an adventure every day, and I laugh. And one of my famous things I tell so many people now is, and I'm sure you're all aware of it, if everything was perfect, we'd all be bored to death. You need to have challenges and setbacks and a few disappointments to keep things interesting. You know, so thank you. Geez.
Other questions, sir?
My wife skips admonition about being open on Sundays. How was it you boys closed?
I'll tell you now.
They have I-80 going through, so they don't have a slow day.
Yeah, I was really giving my brother the business for closing on Sunday and Monday instead of just Monday and Tuesday like us. But he didn't elaborate. I chuckle every Monday morning when I walk through the door at 7 a.m. at that restaurant, because Monday's our cleaning day, maintenance day, deliveries come in, and maybe a couple occasional deliveries for pharmaceutical reps that call you, and you absolutely can't say no because they call you, and if you don't do it, they'll call someone else, okay? But Tuesday we cook, and that's what Rizzo's does. they cook, so I think I caught them off guard when I instead of saying what my father would have said, bullshit, you're not closing Tuesday. I said, well, they're the Kings. It's massive. You all have probably been there. It's this massive, huge place. And I said, well, if they're doing it, we'll try it. And I'm now amazed at what we're able to get prepared with the day being closed. But I still get the last laugh because people probably think I'm sitting on my butt for 2 days with nothing to do, but not quite the story. So, and they're both, the boys are both there, one of those days, if not both of them too. So it's all good. Good.
Any other questions?
Go ahead, have a few more, at least one or two more. Jeff.
When can you eat?
Okay.
Lou, on that subject of your dad telling you and Eddie about the closing, I've heard the story a million times about, I forget if it was a Friday after Thanksgiving, I forget exactly what day it was, but apparently you suggested to your dad that maybe you might close that day, and what words of wisdom did he tell you?
Well, I'll go with what I think that could lead up to, and that is we used to have a patio, which is where our main dining room is now. It had a canvas awning, and my brother and I we were gun shy about it, but we kind of finally let my dad know that we're no longer going to just be closed Easter and Christmas. We're going to be closed all holidays. And obviously he wasn't very happy. So he was mumbling and grumbling, and I don't know why you're not open. So I'm going to say the first holiday besides those two religious holidays was 4th of July. So my other brother that's a retired Marine that's living in South Carolina, he was home visiting, and Eddie and I and our father and my brother from South Carolina, we were sitting on that patio and we were closed. And he was being subtle, my father, but he was still kind of mumbling and making some remarks about why we weren't open. We could be selling 6-packs or something. And all of a sudden, in front of the lattice that gave a little bit of privacy where the sidewalk was at the street, I just happened to notice a car pull up. So I just was looking to get focused, and I was like, who the hell is that? So I saw the window come down, and I heard a lady say, are you open today? And my father quickly spun his head around. He says, no, my boys don't need the money. I got up and left on that one. I got up and told my brothers, I'll see you. Is that the one you're talking about, John? Oh, there we go. Is that the one, John?
There.
Okay.
Yeah, just real quick, where did the name Luigi come from?
Well, that's Louis in Italian.
Okay.
So when your name's Louis, you get Lou, Sweet Lou, Louis, Louis, Luigi, or Gigi. In Italy, a lot of gentlemen named Luigi, they call him Gigi. So we call him Gigi. And he was young, he didn't like it because sometimes you'd say Gigi, and he'd say, that's a girl's name.
That's a grandma's name.
Or that.
Yeah. Anyone else? Abraham?
Any thoughts on expanding even more?
I don't know, Sal. I don't know if another restaurant is in our future, but probably diversifying in a way we're making different products we have available in different ways, or some other services. I don't want to speak too much beforehand, but we are actively, brainstorming different ways to grow the business, but maybe not necessarily another restaurant. Between that and the pizza shop, especially in today's world, it's pretty challenging as it is. But that's not to say there isn't another avenue or avenues that we've been exploring for the future. So stay tuned. Thank you. Anything else? No? Well, I do have books available here if anyone would like to pick up a copy. If not, don't worry, I won't be offended. I'm just grateful that you all showed up tonight. Oh yeah, well, the painting here. So this is a painting that my Aunt Kristen Olson had painted. It's a depiction of what my grandparents' house would have looked like every Sunday. And really, to go with it, it's a nice little paddle too. I might have received a couple of these as a kid, but you know, this would have been used to stir that famous sauce and meatballs. I mean, this, between the two of these things here, this depiction and this sauce, I mean, this is really like our origins of the business. You know, the sauce is the boss, and it was one of the main things that, you know, gave them the good idea to open up this restaurant, knowing how much, you know, their family and a lot of their friends enjoyed the sauce and meatball and pasta entrees that they had prepared at home for years. So, you know, I thought my aunt had done a beautiful job at painting this picture and really depicting what it would have been like on a Sunday afternoon in their home. There is a couple other paintings she had painted as well in the display case over here.
I want to add one more funny thing about the sauce. One day I was making the sauce in a big vat we have in the kitchen, and my dad came over and looked at it. He looked at it, stirred it, got a clean spoon and tasted it, and he said, "Remember, mister, a good sauce disguises a lot of things." So if you accidentally would mess up something and there was no time to really fix it, if you put a little extra sauce on it, it would probably get you through, you know. And it's true, it does work.
Okay. Anything else?
Could you introduce your brother too?
Come on up here, Sal. It's my brother Salvatore.
How are you guys doing? Hello. I'm Sal. I want to thank you all for coming out and supporting my brother tonight and my family. We are blessed to be here tonight in front of all you great people, and we're very thankful for all of you. And you know, I don't have as many good things to say as these guys, or funny things, or maybe as informative, but
Yes, he does.
it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for coming out. Thank you.
Dad puts up with it. She says to me, "You know how lucky you are. You married a woman that puts up with a husband that runs a restaurant." And that's true.
Okay, I think we're good. Well, guys, please don't be shy. There's plenty of pizza in the back available. We brought a lot, so I hope you're hungry. And I look forward to speaking with you all a little bit more as you're eating. So thank you very much.